Hello everyone, this is Gene and I'm back with another video. Today's video will be covering what I'm going to call a rumor regarding Captain Marvel 2, regarding the film. And the reason I say it's a rumor is because the only article for it that I have found thus far is so riddled with inaccuracies and, in my opinion, flat out lies that I can't really trust it. At the same time, though, just because there are inaccuracies and, in my opinion, lies in the article does not mean that the issue of who supposedly, at least one of the writers for Captain Marvel 2 will be. You know the phrase, even a broken clock sometimes gets the time right, like it'll get the time right twice or something? It's kind of that thing, right? Just because everything else is wrong doesn't mean this particular factoid is wrong. So I'm approaching this with it's possible because of Disney and the film and all that, and the connection that this writer has to the character of Captain Marvel, but I'm not going to say that it's certain because at this point I don't trust the source. Perhaps if more information comes out from more trustworthy sources that can do basic research, then perhaps I'll buy more and more if it's true. So I'm going to say take this with caution, take this with a grain of salt. But according to an article on a website known as Sausage Roll, it says sausageroll.com.au, which I'm going to assume is for Australia. According to this article, a writer, they say it's been confirmed that a writer, at least one writer for Captain Marvel 2, for the film Captain Marvel 2, is going to be Kelly Sue DeConnick. Now, if you're familiar with comics, you are probably groaning in great pain right now. If you're not, let me explain who Kelly Sue DeConnick is. You know the current Captain Marvel that we have, the one that most people don't like? Yeah, she's the reason why we have her. So let me take you back a few years. Let me take you back to 2006. In 2006, a writer known as Brian Reed was given the reins on a not Captain Marvel at the time, Miss Marvel comic. This was during the days of the Civil War storyline and whatnot. While the comic was never exactly setting sales figures on fire or anything like that, it did last for 4 years. So from 06 to 10, he wrote, and only he wrote. He was the only writer on that Miss Marvel solo series run. He wrote that entire run, and I've read that entire run. I read it, I think, back in 2018, maybe early 2019. And to me personally, I thought it was a very good, very, very solid run. There were standout issues to me. One of the most heartbreaking issues, in my opinion, was issue, I think, 31. It's called Family, which is when Carol goes home to see her mother and her ailing father. And to me, it's very heartbreaking because you see how her losing her connection to her memories, losing her emotional connection to her past, because that was one of the sort of after effects, whatever you want to call it, of Professor Xavier restoring the majority of her memories after Rogue nearly killed her. He was able to restore her memories, but Professor X was not able to restore her emotional connection to anything past what Rogue had done to her. So Carol knows who these people are, but she doesn't feel the love a daughter should feel toward her mother or her father. She doesn't feel the love a sister should have toward her brother, and things of that nature. So it's a really, for me personally, heart-wrenching issue, I should say. It's an issue. So I suggest, if you want to, you should go read it to see what actual writing is like. So there's that. But in my opinion, Brian Reed was a very good writer for the series, for the character, and there was only one issue that I can think that I can think of that I thought was like really just objectively bad. And it was like, I think it was like it was either issue 47 or issue 49. It's at the very end of the series. It's the one where she goes on a date with Spider-Man. It was just dumb. But outside of that, I really liked his run. His run is also known for the last major story arc, which is the War of the Marvel storyline, which is when she goes face to face and toe to toe with Moonstone. I think that was during the Dark Avenger story arc. That was like the overall arc that was going on in comics at the time. So again, a good read and a recommend in my personal opinion. But anyway, back to the point. So this series, again, while not a huge seller by any means, was consistently doing well enough to warrant a 4-year run. The run ends at issue 50 in 2010. In 2012, the character of Carol Danvers is brought back, and reintroduced, rebranded as Captain Marvel. So, especially back then, if you're more recent, you probably think of Captain Marvel with the long blonde hair and the plain Jane looks. Well, the Captain Marvel that was brought to comic readers in 2012 was quite different. Very short, masculine haircut. The body was entirely different. New skin-tight costume that was supposedly be reminiscent of a flight suit. That was the excuse. That looks nothing like a flight suit, but okay. And the reason behind this change is Kelly Sue DeConnick. What happened is that they wanted to reintroduce the character, and they wanted to give her a new personality, so they chose Kelly Sue, in part because Kelly Sue had a past somewhat similar to Carol Danvers. Kelly Sue was an army brat growing up. There was a period in her life where she struggled with alcoholism. So they figured, well, she's had some of the issues that Carol Danvers has had. She must be able to write her well, right? No. Because by this point in comics, at least in Marvel Comics, you had the Civil War II storyline. So Carol is now the bad guy in this storyline. Not only is she the bad guy, she's basically a fascist, throwing people in illegal prisons, and I don't know why I got cotton mouth today. I don't know what's going on. But anyhow, most famously, beating Tony Stark into a coma, which is something they're only just now addressing, 7 years later, having her finally admit that, yeah, she actually did this and was wrong. And apparently in one of the comics it makes clear that she didn't just beat Tony into a coma, she killed him, apparently. I haven't read this particular issue yet, I have to see. But that's what I've been hearing and reading, that they finally acknowledged that what she did to him was actually fatal. Of course, all of this was just pretense to just kill off all of the established male characters so that their female counterparts could take over in what in 2016 was dubbed as the all different Marvel. Having in female stand-ins who either A, were not developed well enough characters to stand on their own, or B, characters that actually were well liked, like X-23, like She-Hulk, and instead of just letting them be themselves, had them take over the mantle of their male counterpart, X-23 becoming Wolverine. I've read several issues of that run. Dear God, it set me into a frothing rage. And then, of course, She-Hulk becoming Hulk, right? She had her own comic, but it was called Hulk, and it was written by Mariko Tamaki, and dear God, was it ever awful. I read some issues. Dear God, was it awful. I hope Mariko Tamaki never writes in comics again. That's how bad it was. But anyway, I personally blame Kelly Sue for all this because she started it with her rebrand of Captain Marvel, who she herself admitted that she based off Chuck Yeager. Right? So this is her. This is her. This is the lady we have to blame. Though to be fair, she has not been a writer on Captain Marvel, I think, since 2014, 2015. And the current writer on Captain Marvel is Kelly Thompson. What is it with all these Kellys? Right? Who, as I've made clear in my reviews of Captain Marvel and in the video I did recently of the review of the preview for Star, I'm not exactly all that impressed with Kelly Thompson's writing. To my knowledge, the only two characters she's ever written well are Gambit and Rogue for the Mr. and Mrs. X comic run, because she actually likes those two as a couple. Though to be fair, I have not read her writing in that yet. But the general consensus I've run into from comic review channels that I trust is that her writing is actually decent there. Probably because she actually likes the characters. But anyhow, so apparently, if this little tidbit about this article is true, Kelly Sue DeConnick may, I want to be clear, may be brought on to what's what I'm looking for, to be a writer on Captain Marvel 2. If this is true, all I have to say is that while I'm saddened to hear this, I'm not surprised. She is basically ground zero, patient zero, when it comes to why the character of Captain Marvel is the way she is today. Because it started out with her. Now, Kelly Sue DeConnick is a very outspoken feminist, which wouldn't be so bad if her brand of feminism wasn't so anti-woman, or just anti any type of sense. Surprisingly enough, though, for a woman who quite literally wrote a comic called Bitch Planet, no, I'm not joking, she's interestingly enough married to a man, Matt Fraction, who also works in comics. So there's that, right? There's the piece on Kelly Sue and how I feel about her as a writer. I don't like her. She's the one who, for a very long time, made Carol this very angry, overly aggressive, I would say almost stereotypically masculine character when she had never been like that. And to my understanding, at least to me, her take on Captain Marvel also showed a gross misunderstanding of men, because she seems to be under the impression, if I judge her by her work, that men, all men, right, or the majority of men, view strength, right, through being overly aggressive. Are there times where you have to be aggressive? Yes. But men and women both know that there is aggressiveness, right? Then there's over-aggressiveness. Over-aggressiveness very rarely will ever get you what you want. Whether it's someone to see things your way, or to settle or diffuse an issue, it typically is not going to go your way if you are overly aggressive. I don't know of any well-adjusted person who thinks that over-aggressiveness is a positive trait in either sense. So there's that. I think you can figure out my opinion on Kelly Sue DeConnick as a writer. But anyway, what I also wanted to address were the glaring inaccuracies in this particular article from Sausage Roll, just about a few things, because it proves to me that they didn't do the basics of the research. For example, in this it says that, and I'm reading directly from the article. I'm gonna link the article in the video once it uploads, so understand, I'm reading directly from it. It says, meet the Captain Marvel 2 writer Kelly Sue DeConnick. She is an uber feminist, never Trumper, pro-Iranian, and Islam activist, but most importantly, an avid comic book reader, massive nerd, and passionate geek. And here's the part, that's where it ends. I'm going to add a few more things. She's a wife to Matt Fraction. She's a mother. I don't know if her children are natural, as in biologically related to her and Matt, or if they're adopted. I'm not going to dig. But still, she's a mother. She said herself she has a daughter in an interview in 2013, right? And she works in comics. She's made her own comic, as I mentioned earlier, Bitch Planet. She has worked on Captain Marvel. She's worked for IEW. She's worked for DC. So there's a little more to her than just comic book reader, massive nerd, and passionate geek. She actually works in the industry. How do you can literally just go to Wikipedia and look up this stuff. So, sausage roll. How the hell did you not get these, or rather, why are these facts not here listed with everything else? You mentioned the fact that she's pro-Iranian and she's a never-Trumper, but you don't mention the fact that she literally works in the business. Why is that? Why is that? Why did you, in my opinion, intentionally leave those things out? Because those are not things that are especially hidden. They are public knowledge that you will literally see if you just type in her name on Google. So tell me, why are you not telling the whole truth about her? So there's that. Then, I'm scrolling through here. So, it says here, well, actually, here's the part I find funny. It says here that she may not be a seasoned screenwriter. No duh, just because you can write comics poorly does not mean that you are a seasoned screenwriter. But she says here, but the article says here, I should say, that she may not be a seasoned screenwriter, but what she lacks in experience, she makes up for in passion. Kelly is a champion for women's rights. She embodies Captain Marvel. Maybe because she wrote her. But anyway, then proof that she's somehow this champion of women's rights. We see a tweet from her under it, I guess in retweeting or reposting an article, I'm not on Twitter, talking about why Donald Trump should not be president. Because yes, complaining about the Trump presidency is so revolutionary right now. I mean, it's what all of the revolutionaries do. They complain about a president that they can't do anything about, but whine and complain. But she's such a women's rights activist and feminist that she hates Trump. Like, I don't know, a good half of the country. Still waiting for California to actually leave the union like they threatened to do back in 2016. But they haven't done yet. I'm just saying, keep your promises. But anyway, then, after that, here's a funny thing. And I know this is a flat-out lie or just they're spinning facts because I actually watched a lot of the stuff that they're talking about in this next section happen. So it says here that Kelly Sue was also a prominent figurehead in the Gamergate and less heard of Comicsgate movement. Are you serious? You're telling me people don't... Everybody in comics knows about Comicsgate. Many people in Gamergate have now made their way to Comicsgate, like Zoe Quinn, and the comics people are not happy. But anyway, it says here, and less heard of Comicsgate movement who worked tirelessly alongside Anita Sarkeesian to eradicate toxic masculinity from a male-dominated video game and comic book culture. Now, for all of my gamers out there who remember Gamergate, do you recall Kelly Sue DeConnick ever being mentioned in Gamergate, especially in the same breath as Anita Sarkeesian? Because I don't. I remember watching Anita's videos and going into a frothing gamer rage. I remember watching other people's responses. I never saw or heard a damn thing about Kelly Sue DeConnick. Never heard one thing about her, didn't hear a peep from her. I know it's been about 5-6 years now, but if you're a gamer and you remember Gamergate, please tell me if you ever heard of Kelly's name in that, because I know I didn't. I'm not saying she didn't make a tweet or two here or there, but I don't recall her in any of Anita's work, in any of her references, or anything. She was not a prominent player. Zoe Quinn was, Anita was, Brianna Wu was, Jonathan McIntosh was, not Kelly Sue. Now, as for Comicsgate, what this article tries to say is that what is Comicsgate? Essentially, it is a feminist movement within the comic book community. No, it's not. No, it's not. Comicsgate, even I'm not sure what it is now, but it certainly is not a feminist movement. But I can tell you that it started out as a consumer revolt against the poor quality comics that were being and sadly still are being released in today's mainstream comics, and even in some of the more well-known independent circles like Boom or IEW IDW and comics companies, houses, studios, whatever you want to call them, like that. And also, it was a rebellion against the absolute awful and unprofessional, and in my opinion, oftentimes harassing behavior from comics creators to the fans, whether it was stalking and doxing diversity in comics to looking up information on his personal life. Yeah, he went through it. That man went through it. And let's not forget that Mark Waid allegedly interfered with his contract with Antarctic Press to have his comic book Jawbreakers published, and now Mark is being sued by him. That is the type of thing that Comicsgate, whether with all the infighting inside of it, is against. It was a consumer revolt. It's morphed into something else now, but its origins were as a consumer revolt, not as a feminist movement. Now, then it goes on to talk about the milkshake incident. It says here that that Comicsgate got started after a bunch of female Marvel staffers got together for a milkshake and posed for a group selfie. That part is true. What happened is that at the time, Flo Steinberg, who had actually been a real pioneer for women in comics, had passed away. She had been very, very, very old. So it wasn't like she was younger. She had lived a good life, and she had actually really paved the way for women in comic books. And Heather Antos, who was an editor at Marvel at the time and did not do her job, because I read her comics, she's awful. She and several female writers at Marvel, in what might be the most stereotypically basic white girl photo I've seen yet, all posed with a milkshake in hand, talking about how they were commemorating the life of Flo Steinberg. No, they weren't. But anyway, there were a few people who commented saying that they were fake geek girls, in particular to Heather herself, which was true. If you read her work, you'll quickly realize that she doesn't know a thing about comics. And this basically blew up because what Heather did was start crying harassment, in particular after about, I think it was 3 people, supposedly men, left comments, or not even left comments, they simply made comments that she was then like retweeted on or whatever, which amounted to, I don't like her, but she's kind of hot. I do her. Which apparently she took as sexual harassment. Let's just say that I respectfully disagree on this being sexual harassment. Is it being uncouth? Yes. But no one said that they were going to come and rape her or force her to have sex. They were just saying, she's attractive, I'd sleep with her if I had the chance. Okay, someone being brash, right, and uncouth does not mean they are sexually harassing you. You actually need the harassment part. Somebody saying that once is not harassing you. But anyway, so the article continues. Then a bunch of trolls called them fake geek girls. They reacted by creating a militant feminist movement. No, they didn't. they complained and they complained and they complained online, and Heather played damsel in distress. And then DC got involved by doing their own milkshake photo in a sign of solidarity, which does not surprise me. But there was no militant feminist movement that suddenly started up because of the milkshake incident. Interestingly enough, I think about a year or so after that, Heather Antos ended up leaving comics. Of course, she made a huge drama about it, acting as if she was pushed out. She wasn't. She ended up leaving comics, going to, I believe, an online gaming company of some sort, to which the comics community at the time pretty much, I say comic critic community, the comic critic community at the time pretty much said, "See ya, don't let the door hit you on the way out." And then, shortly later, she ended up coming back to comics. Last I heard, I think she was an editor at IDW. So it wasn't like she came back to Marvel or anything. But yeah, I call all the BS on this particular article and how it's, in my opinion, rewriting history. There was not, nor has there been, a militant feminist movement. Now, there are feminist comics and comic writers, but I would not necessarily say they are the best representation of feminism. Nobody with a reasonable mind, I would say, would think that Captain Marvel, or more recently in DC, there was I think it was the Female Furies, yes. In DC, just some guy did reviews of these comics. But in DC last year, they had a several issue run featuring the Female Furies. Now, for those again who are not familiar, the Female Furies are basically Darkseid's personal fighting force, right? The toughest of the tough warriors. And they made these warriors and Granny Goodness, who sort of like is the evil, villainous mentor, grandmotherly figure, into absolute idiots to make a point that doesn't exist. It was just awful. Awful. The art was awful. If that's supposed to be feminist, then I proudly remain not a feminist. But I would not personally consider those type of comics or the writing within as any I just wouldn't consider it feminist. I would consider it a caricature, if anything, of feminism, or at least of what feminism used to be. But anyway, so it says here that, it continues saying that the trolls called them fake geek girls, and they reacted by creating a militant feminist movement. That's BS. And then, which purpose was to eradicate toxic masculinity from geek culture, specifically comic book culture? No. Now, I will admit that a lot of the female writers and a lot of the male writers and a lot of the writers in general in comics today antagonize the audience, which is majority male, because it's comics, and superhero comics have always had a majority male audience. So yes, I would say that they antagonize them, but I wouldn't necessarily say there was eradicate toxic masculinity. What they've done is eradicate the ideal. They've eradicated the ideal masculine, the ideal feminine, the ideals of heroism and anything else. That's what's been eradicated. So if their goal was to get rid of toxic masculinity, I hate to break it to you, but you didn't. In fact, majority of comics writers and creators out there, you are the very embodiment of all the toxicity you claim to hate. You've become the very thing you can't stand. Just thought I should let you know that, one comic fan to another, in case any comics creators come across this. They probably won't, but you never know. But anyway, so that's about it for this article. So yeah, given that it is just objectively wrong in many areas, and in my opinion it's just flat out lying and rewriting history, I am not going to say that this story about Kelly Sue DeConnick is true. But at the ow, damn it, my tongue. But at the same time, it's not impossible. That could be the one nugget of truth in an article of lies. Don't know. So we'll have to watch and see, but I just thought that I should just share my thoughts with you all, and if this does turn true, let you know exactly who Kelly Sue DeConnick is. So we'll see what happens. We have an entire year to go. Things could change. Nothing is set in stone. But until then, I will see y'all around, and hopefully I can solve this issue of cottonmouth. So I apologize if I sound weird in any way. So anyway, I will see y'all around. Bye.